Prevention is Cure podcast. You're with me, Prof Grant Schofield, and today's really a great pleasure. We've got PREKURE's head health coach, Sonya English, joining us. Hi, Sonya.
Kia ora, Grant. Welcome.
Thanks for coming on. You were actually on the Prevention is Cure podcast as one of the original guests, probably going back 4 years now. So people can go back to listen to that, but I think it's worth revisiting because, the health coaching journey's continued for you. Why don't we start with who you are, where you come from, particularly your medicine and nursing background, that story of that, and then how you transitioned into a career of, actually, I suppose now one of New Zealand's top health coaches, heading up the PREKURE faculty.
Thanks, Grant. Gosh, where to start? I've been a nurse for well over 3 decades now. Started in the 80s, actually. And I had a brother that was very sick. And so got a very early, at a young age, kind of bird's eye view of the hospital system, which was the old Princess Mary. And I saw good and bad back then. And I think that really struck a chord with me, an aha moment that I wanted to do better as a nurse. That's where my nursing career started. And from there, I really spent the majority of my nursing career as an intensive care nurse. I've worked overseas as a flight nurse, an ICU educator, and still a nurse specialist in patient rescue type service, which is a deteriorating patient, and particularly have been interested in prevention of organ failure. This preventative space seems to have been in my blood from a very early age. And, I would walk around the ICU and think, this doesn't have to be. So, and see patients in whānau, absolutely ecstatic that they've overcome this critical illness, only to see them again and again and again out on the wards coming back. So this has been one of the things that's driven my work. I love challenge, and I've really been very lucky with my career. I've met some incredible people. So yeah, that's where
So
I've
it's sort of
been as a person.
repeat acutely ill people coming to the hospital, but
Yeah.
those conditions have by and large been chronic conditions that are preventable in the first place. And those people are probably, I suppose, I don't know if you would say this, I might have heard you say this, that they've got younger and younger, those repeat customers over the, I think it's 4 decades you've been involved, Sonya.
It is 4 decades. I was trying not to say that, Grant. Actually, you're absolutely right. It is this rising storm of non-communicable disease, the chronic underlying disease that we see. And absolutely, I started in Green Lane ICU, the old Green Lane ICU, when One Tree Hill had a tree on it. Used to look out of the window and nursed my ICU cardiothoracic clients and back then. So, and then, we were generally caring for people a bit older, but as the years have gone by, I'm seeing now 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds with quite severe comorbidities, non-communicable diseases, really preventable, and it's really heartbreaking. And my role now is I do casual still as a nurse specialist, and I don't do it very often, but for me, why I keep doing that is it lights the fire for the preventative work. I see a 20, 30-year-old on the resus team. We're working hard to keep them going. I see the despair of the family and the patients really struggling, and I'm just like, this is crazy. We don't have to be here. So it really drives the work I do.
I mean, frankly, my hat goes off to anyone working in the public hospital system. When my observations of visited people that I know have been in there, and I walk around the wards, it's sort of pretty confronting as the front face of how chronic disease and the burden of poor health affects society. It's an astonishing thing, but to do it day in, day out, without any way of going upstream and helping sort the problem in the first place, I can only imagine how difficult that must be.
Absolutely. And I guess what I've started to do as a health coach now is work with health professionals who are really in the burnout. The stats on the burnout for health professionals are climbing. I think a recent survey of GPs was something like 79%. So, I'm seeing my mates out there in the hospital systems. I'm seeing them find their happiness through trolleys of sugar, on night shift to keep them going. I'm seeing the burnout of, I need to do better when they're trying to do 150% with 50% resource. And, that really creates great despair in me. And I really have used a lot of my health coaching skills to work alongside these people. How do we reframe in a world that's hyper connected, that is changing massively, and the healthcare system's just not up to par?
So how did you actually start? How does one go from being an ICU nurse and then also rushing around the hospital resuscitating people who are approaching death, or in many cases may have actually died? How do you? It's quite a big step to go and train as a health coach. How did that happen?
Well, I think the first piece that really shifted me was working with the elderly. What I noticed at the other end of the scale is our elderly, again, have, multiple comorbidity, and we're not really talking to them. We're not really having end of life conversations that involve what it is they want. We have a service that says we should do this, but in reality, we don't have enough time. There's not enough feet on the ground to do this. So I think what shifted was I trained to be an advanced care practitioner. And what's interesting is, going to the bedside of a deteriorating patient who's got end stage disease and then having a conversation when they're breathless and very unwell. What is it you want? Which was really awful to be a part of. It wasn't the right time to do that. Family were very upset. The patient was scared. So for me, I think that was the first thing that started to change my mind around the way we're communicating and the timing of our communicating and the telling, the listening to tell rather than the listening to hear. So I was very lucky to have a conversation with yourself, Grant, at the time, and have a conversation with Dr. Louise Schofield around some ideas around health coaching. And from the minute you said it, I was in. I was keen for something new, for doing things in a more meaningful way, slowing down and spending time with people to understand what really matters to them. What is it that they want?
So if we just go back to that end of life situation, so I think I'm getting these statistics right, and I think they're true pretty much universally across most Western health systems, that we spend about a third of our health budget in the last 6 months to a year of people's lives, and the bulk of that is for care that it's uncertain whether it makes any difference to the quality and quantity of their life, and in some cases could at least make the quality worse. Does that resonate, or am I just dreaming those statistics up?
Well, anecdotally from the front line, it definitely resonates. I feel like for me, what I've seen is that we are seeing the process. We're on this sort of process trajectory, but we're not seeing the person. And I guess the reality of what I see is it's time. Health professionals, they know that they need to have these conversations when they come into ED, between then and putting them out to the wards and going into theatre, but there is not enough resource to do that. And it should be done in primary care way before that. We have advanced care planning. It's just something that gets missed
So
out.
people have then already thought about, before they get to that stage, about how they would like things to look at. I don't know if you want to talk about this story. I've heard you tell it a few times now, but you went up to resuscitate an older woman. She'd, technically was now dead. She had died peacefully, sometime during the night, but you resuscitated her, which was probably a terrifying experience for her. She remained alive for another 2 days in pain, at which point she died for real a second time. Am I recounting that right? And just tell me why you've told me that story.
I guess it's interesting. That is a common story. And I guess what happens is a resuscitation status is not documented. And so legally we have to resuscitate someone. And in the middle of the night, it's not the best time to be doing that. So the ward will call out the resuscitation team and we will commence CPR if it's required, if their heart stops, or we will help, early resuscitation and prevention of other organ failure. And so that story is something I've seen so many times where I know in my heart and my intuition that this is not the right thing to do. However, legally, I need to do that. And so we go through the motions. We call in family, of course, straight away. But it's, we're trying to get those decisions in the middle of the night. And I really believe, I think this was one of the things that started me off on the health coaching, is about being able to spend more time with people and go to the upstream part of health and help them or support them to understand what health is, to be able to take control and agency back over their own health journey.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know what your view on why we're scared about talking about the finite life we have and the fact that none of us are getting out of this alive.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we're getting out of the podcast alive, but the you know what I mean? Yeah. But life in general, there's only one way we're all exiting. Why we have discomfort in talking about that and the advanced care planning that you're talking about. But equally, I suppose my view and the key to a good life, when we're talking about well-being and the very upstream parts of the prevention is cure message and what it takes to be the best version of yourself, one of the key ways to do that is to understand, one of the essential truths of life is that you're going to die. And I don't know, why are we so reticent of talking about that? And, you've seen a lot of people at the end of their life.
Look, I believe, having been a nurse for all these years, that it is cultural. Different cultures do different things, definitely. But I think in more recent years, it's become very taboo to talk about death. We can't even say the word. Someone's died. So as a nurse, I believe that we should all have courageous conversations and document what we want and when we want it, because I've seen so many times, so many tragedies, and in particular in younger people, where they haven't had the opportunity. And I would also say of death, of course, as an ICU nurse, I've seen a lot of death, that there is also beauty in death. This is a very strong family time, whānau time, and there is such thing as a good death. We can control pain. There can be agency over the way things are done. And this is my best hope for the future of humans, is understanding that they, people, including myself, need to be the project manager of our own health, that we do have some influence over what happens to us, and to be able to have the courage and strength to do that and start having these really difficult conversations, but make it the norm.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about this aspect, and it's fine if you don't, but with people don't know that Sonya and I are also cousins. So my mum and my Aunt Jan is Sonia's mum. And we both lost our dads over the last couple of years. So they're those two sisters' husbands. And there's two quite different trajectories here, and both of them were pretty brutal. That my dad remained cognitively really well to the end, but had no way of accepting the idea that he had a finite life. He still thought he was going home on the last day that he was in palliative care because he was getting better. And I felt that several years of terminal cancer without coming to terms with his finality, really ruined his last several years of life. And that was such a shame. On the other hand, my uncle, your dad, Gary, had some cognitive decline that meant he didn't have those issues, but that was equally as brutal. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that.
Oh, absolutely brutal, Grant. And, it is that long, slow piece. Do you know, it's so interesting that you've brought that up because health coaching really helped me with my dad. Some of the mental fitness training that I did really helped me to, and I think the number one skill that I got was seeing the person, not the problem. I was able to go back to and even use my neuroscience of who is my dad now? What's actually functioning here? And
Mm.
how can I make connection with him? And it was by truly listening, not so much to the words, because they were quite garbled, but to the behavior, to the tone. I could spend time with him and work using my coaching skills in a way that gave us a tiny bit of joy. And each
Mm.
time I saw them, it wasn't what was wrong. I walked away with the small win. And
Yeah,
for me,
I did.
that
You were able to
coaching
eke those.
wasn't that.
Yeah, you're able to eke that out.
Yeah.
You should be really proud of what you're able to do there. I suppose the other thing that people should know is that Sonia's also this is part of the problem about being, a really good health coach is that Sonia's ended up being sort of the family health coach as well, um, which is is an unpaid semi-voluntary position that results in a lot of calls that she might not necessarily want them either at that time or ever, but she does it.
I have to say it's my privilege,
Yeah.
Grant, and I mean that sincerely. I do. I think, connection is medicine, and for me, it's a purpose, right? I get a lot of joy out of helping my family.
Yeah, which I think is
Yeah.
what we're touching on here is the other side of health coaching. So, everyone's always going, well, what job am I getting? Where am I doing it? And we'll talk about how it can augment your existing health professional work, or you do your own private practice now. But the skills in of themselves are sort of ubiquitously important in in
Absolutely.
in your own family and own life. So if you're sort of wired that way, which you are, it makes a tremendous difference to a whole bunch of people in that aspect as well. It's actually good
Well,
talking
I
about that.
often say to people, I did, as you said, nearly 4 decades of nursing, and I thought, I'm a good communicator. I really can relate to people and build rapport, which I could. But I would say that health coaching is another level. And I had no idea when I first took it on how it would change the trajectory of how I still work with patients in the hospital. Quite often, when I talk to people and ask them like a power question or something that gives them a little bit of space just to be them, they cry. They just cannot believe someone's truly seen them. Um, in my home life, all the people up my street, just everywhere. But that communication skill has changed my life for the better. Definitely around my own growth, my own mental fitness. It's just a knock-on effect.
One thing that's be really obvious to people when they talk to you, actually, any well-trained health coach, is that um, quite often we'll get in a conversation, but it's always you're asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of listening. Tell me about that process, because it seems to be quite a turnaround from how we tend to want to behave as humans, especially the fix-it type people, which in medicine we are. And we talk about taming down the advice monster. What do you make of that? And what conversation with you is not frustrating, but it's you feel listened to. Uh, Tell me about that process.
Well, I have to tell you, when I first learnt this, I battled because I was trained to fix people. And so being able to flip that, and I call it a more meaningful way to do health. For me, I'm now not fixing, I'm actually getting myself out of the way. So my focus as a health coach is on the person in front of me. They are the expert of themselves, and it is my job to truly listen and see the experience of that person as they live it. And getting out of the way is, once you gain that skill, is such a gift in terms of being able to just be the sounding board, to be able to reflect back what you hear and allow someone just to open their mind to see the world in a different way. People get very stuck in the patterns they're in, and I'm a great believer that your biggest mountain is your own mind.
So
So
you got to open that up.
you've got to open it up. And one of the key skills, and I did sort of know this in my nursing, but it's really personified now, is space and silence. You'll know you've got those friends that you talk to, and before you finish the sentence, they're telling you about their story, and they're listening to tell. Uh, Health coaching is about allowing people to explore. It's creative, it's fun, and I love the fun. One of my strong values is humour. So what I love about this process, it is fun, it's creative, it's seeing the possibilities, and it's hopeful conversations with people around their health.
So a study came out recently where they looked at transcripts of medical appointments, and
Yes.
specialists, the median time from the start of the session until they started giving advice was 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was quite a bit longer for GPs. It was 11 seconds. What do you make of that?
I feel that. I work in the hospital and have a pager and a phone, and I've got to go to every deteriorating patient and assess and review and solve. Sometimes it's quite frantic. And I know I've got nurse practitioner friends and GPs, and they've got 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And a full assessment of a patient takes way longer than that. So I believe that it's the time pressure. These are good people. They have really good intent. However, it's impossible, the task that they have.
Right.
And so, they're typing at the same time they're talking. They're not looking at the person. They're thinking about all the other sick people. They probably haven't had any break for goodness knows how long, and the bladder's probably full as well. And so trying to be able to focus and be present with the person in front of you is almost impossible in that space.
Yeah, our system is set up to fail
Yep.
the person. And notwithstanding, if I have a broken leg or if I'm in a car accident or whatnot, I want every resource in that hospital, and there's some amazing resources, but yeah, it's not set up for the person.
Absolutely. Amazing, especially for acute illness.
Yeah.
We have world-class healthcare in that prospect, but just when it comes to chronic health, it's the revolving door. We're just putting plasters on, and we're not able to get to the root cause very often. It's the same.
So now I should be more prepared for this in this podcast, but there's a New Zealand doctor who's a specialist, Ivor, that you gave the book to my mum, that then Louise and I borrowed and read it. Do you remember that book? I think you know
I do. I read it. It came out only in June 2025.
Do you remember what that book is called?
It is called A Dim Prognosis. And it talks about our healthcare system, the private healthcare system. And Ivor wrote this from just his experience as he travelled through his career as a doctor. And yeah, just very telling, especially for someone that works in the same system.
I was surprised. It's a good book, A Dim Prognosis by, is it Ivor Popov? That's his name?
Popovich.
Oh, Popovich, yeah. You're never going to get it. I'm surprised how frank he was about some of the shortcomings of the medical system, but they are true. And he's been courageous enough to call them out. And yeah, there's a lot going on in the medical system that is structurally difficult for anyone to actually do a decent job. And that is a little bit of a concern.
It is. And, not to say that there aren't incredible treatments and care going on and, highly talented people. It is, as you say, I think for me, what feels amiss is the processes,
Yeah.
From where they come into the hospital to where they get to where they're going, the speed, the time to actually do a full assessment and plan, and the sort of follow-up care around who's seeing them, what are the strategic plans, how much actual input does the client and the patient have. That all needs moving around and changing and looking at. It's a massive job worldwide.
Mm. Okay, let's focus on the positives here about health coaching. So
Yes.
we've talked a little bit about what health coaches do, which is, for one, stop dishing out advice as the first piece of practice. See the person, not just the problem. What else is different about health coaching? When you're talking about the health coaching toolbox, what sorts of skills are we talking about here, and why are they interesting to you?
I think there's a few things, but one of the things that's very different to my other role is that I have time. I have time to, and I do Zoom coaching, I do one-to-one in person, I also do walking coaching, but I have that time to get to know them, to understand their values, their strengths, their beliefs, and what health means to them. Now, that's something I've never done with people in hospitals. So I am actually seeing the person, as I said, not the problem. I see, and I start to see their strengths, which, again, this is positive psychology. I can champion them to actually start making positive moves towards what it is they really want. I can understand what they know and need, but also what they want to know. Again, so it's on their terms.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tension in coaching is, one end of the spectrum. You go, well, if you tell someone what to do, you prescribe something without their permission, not on their terms, then it's almost certain they won't do it. But if they tell you they're going to do it and they want to do it on their terms, then they probably will. So you've got a tension there. You really want to help them change their behaviour, but you can't necessarily just come straight out and just go, look, do this. It seems like the best solution. How do you cross that bridge? And especially when there's things that they just may not even know about, like who necessarily is walking around talking about insulin resistance, or their variations in blood sugar, or some of the solutions are not necessarily already known to those people. How do you deal with that conundrum?
Well, I think the first thing is the mindset, which you talked about. And I think if you can understand as a health coach that people will not do what you tell them to do, they will do what they tell themselves to do. So your skill is being able to help them uncover things and tell themselves what to do in the conversation. And it is about understanding that every client that you have is different. You can't use the same formula or process with everybody. You need to see the person as an individual. And it is so many things. It is the way that you set up, the way that you work with them, and introduce that you have tools and ideas and stuff about nutrition and sleep and breathing and the like. But it's also about listening to their tone, their speed, their body language, listening to your own intuition about what it is that they really want and where they want to go. So you're going to get really detailed on that. What are the pain points? What are the things that they're really struggling with now, the challenges? And what are their best hopes and aspirations for their health? That's the start. Really understand where it is we're going and explore what they already know. Explore what they need to know. With permission, ask, can I share something that's related to your goals? So I think the biggest secret in health coaching is being able to, throughout the whole relationship, make your client the lead of this process. They are the leader, and the way I talk, the way I address them, everything I do reminds them that you're the leader here. You own this health going forward. And my win is their self-efficacy. So I've got to be patient. I've got to get out of the way and really build rapport, get to know them, and get some really solid goals that are realistic. And along the way, open up the aha moments for what they really want. When someone gets an aha moment, when they come to their own conclusions, they get a hit of dopamine. And that is inner motivation. A lot of what people do is external motivation. They're given pamphlets, about 20% of people will react on those. But if you can get some inner motivation, if you can start to get some positive physiological hormones and things going from their small achievements, then you're on their way. It's also about letting them know that change is not perfect. It's messy.
So I want to explore that second part in a moment. I think that's a critical thing. Sort of dwell on the emotion parts. In
Yes.
coaching and in psychology, we talk about two different emotions, and they're both actually really important. One is a thing called dissonance. And so that's actually when you realize that there's a mismatch between the way you're behaving now and what your best life would look like. And it's not to say you don't enjoy some of those things, like you're going to the pub with your mates and you're having a grand old time, that's great. But what you're also doing is not being at home. You're not reading your 7-year-old a bedtime story like you would like to, and you're not achieving some other things. And so there is some emotions there, and those are, and there's tension and negative emotions, and we're not trying to shy away from those. Those are important things. That's part of coaching.
Very much.
Equally, there's a thing called resonance, and it's like, actually, what would your best life look like? And I think you want to talk more about resonance, and that's what you were talking about with those aha moments. That's when your values and your behavior end up aligning.
Yeah, absolutely. And to help get that inner motivation, as you say, you really want to understand for your client, when are they most in flow? What makes them tick? What are their moments or things that they're proud of? That sort of thing. So that's where you're seeing the person as an individual. You're getting to know their beliefs and their values and what drives them.
And people could do that now, listening to this, right? It's like, take a moment and think about what are the moments in your life where the passage of time becomes unimportant? You're deeply engrossed in something. What else would we say about flow, Sonya?
Well, I was just thinking, flow for me is often when I'm with my nursing mates having a really good laugh.
Yeah.
It is the best feeling, and it's usually some black humour about something, but it's just that peace where you lose a bit of time, or with good friends or family, and that is a place of flow. And I guess the world is sped up so much, so being alongside a client and asking them something like, "What are you most proud of?" and them having the space to just really look at that, that's often a start point for getting that inner motivation started.
It's interesting. Rose, who's one of the younger members of my R&D team here at PREKURE, has been, slight diversion, talking about things that she's calling, sociologists in the mid-90s were calling non-places. And so an example of a non-place is, life happens there, but not really, like a service station, gas station, or an airport. These are physical places, but no actual life or memories or flow. The essence of life doesn't really happen there, which is interesting to think about how much time do you spend in non-places. But we've both been trying to wrestle with rewriting a modern version of Aldous Huxley's 1923 Pleasures essay, 1,000 words in Vanity Fair magazine, predicting, lamenting society's interesting but not so good points, which at the time was that people were engaging in social activities that no longer required any participation actively. They'd go and watch a movie, or they had weddings and funerals now without a theological or scientific debate, and he wasn't happy about that. He hadn't heard of Netflix or Instagram. We're trying to do a modern version of that, and we were thinking about these non-places, these physical non-places. But Rose started to talk about the emotional non-places as well, and particularly the role of social media and scrolling. You can just end up in an emotional non-place. So it's not flow, it's not meaning and purpose. You're just stuck somewhere, like scrolling through Instagram or TikTok are the classic examples of not living your best life because you're emotionally nowhere and you're probably physically nowhere as well.
Particularly frightening for our young.
Yeah. Well, these are
Yeah,
exactly the activities that are implicated in
yeah,
we call it a mental health crisis in young people, but in actual fact, it's probably more related to, and I know you're into this neuroscience, into the dysregulation of that dopaminergic system and the reward pathways, and you get sucked into these emotional non-places or these physical non-places, and you're not living a life that's a good one.
yeah. And one of the metaphors I heard on this is, just being out on an island, the
Mm.
avoidance of that island where nothing's happening.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So, I'm curious about your essay. What is the underlying theme of this?
I think it's a good health coaching question there, everyone, by the way, switching it around on me. But I mean, Huxley was right that we won't have to, worry about controlling people's thoughts. They'll be so mired in their own pleasure, they won't be able to think properly. But he didn't understand the full implications of what actually happened, which is actually far worse than even he predicted in sort of futuristic dystopia. That dystopia is actually harder to navigate than you would have thought, because we've become so, everything that especially teenagers do is, you used to have to go somewhere to access these things. There was some effort required, to go out and get some junk food, or to watch a movie, blah blah blah. You had to actually go somewhere. Now you don't have to go anywhere. That instantly available for virtually no cost, right in front of you. You don't have to even leave your own room to game, to access porn, to get junk food delivered, to vape, and at the same time, I saw a statistic yesterday that in the last 20 years, our teenagers now spend, 20 years ago, we're spending about 14 hours a week in contact with other peers outside of school. Um, and that's more than halved, down to 6.5 hours now.
Oh, yeah,
And, I suspect there's some segmentation in that, where there's a bunch of kids that are even lower, and we're not addressing those causes. And I think that's, you'll be seeing this a bit in your own
I am.
teenage boys. I certainly are in mine.
Yeah.
And
Comfort addiction, I call it.
yeah, and in many ways, it's surprising we're not even worse, given what we know about the physiology. It's surprising that some of our kids are able to live in the real world. I mean, one of the most brilliant things that your boys do is they take out fast, unstable yachts and race them across the harbour, which
20
is the
minutes,
exact
yeah.
opposite of the pleasure zone, because it's fast, dangerous, and extremely unstable. So, hats off for getting them out there.
Yeah. I can say that's due to my husband, Paddy. He's a avid sailor,
Yeah,
and yeah, he's over the years persuaded him to do it. But I'm internally grateful
yeah,
for that, I must say. And it was interesting when I was listening to you talk. I think what I've learned through the health coaching is that with the skills that it teaches you, and this is the science, this is the habit change, and it is also the transformational skills, that you can use these in so many ways with your family,
yeah,
with the young people that come to my house to see my kids, with the people down at the boat club, all of the people around me. I can ask a curious question. I can challenge them to do things differently. I can use my gut. So that listening skill that I've learnt, this comfort addiction is it's a pandemic, and we need to, all of us, start doing something about this, getting curious about it, challenging ourselves, challenging others. And this is definitely something that needs to happen. I would encourage all health professionals to do the coach approach training, the habit change training, because just sometimes you just plant one little seed. I challenged someone a little while ago, who I could just see the same pattern, the same pattern, the same pattern, and the same kind of pain point of complaining, if you like, to put it politely, and said, can I share? There is something that I see that keeps happening. What are you going to do to really change this?
Yeah, that's a courageous conversation.
Isn't it?
And what happened?
Nothing. 2 weeks later, next meeting, that thing you said to me? Was it really quite big, but I'm changing now. This is what
Well,
I'm
and they
doing.
told you they were doing it.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was like, oops, I've done that. But actually, sometimes you have to have these conversations with permission. Is
Yeah,
it
and
okay?
the other thing about that, of course, like, there's not a single adult human that says that their own health's not one of their top priorities in their whole life. I've never met a single person that
Exactly.
hasn't said that. And there's not a single teenager that says, I want to be in psychological pain because I'm using too much pleasure. You know, they don't want this, and they do want to change, but telling your teenager to sort their shit out and get off their devices um, plainly doesn't work,
It
because
doesn't.
we've tried that, and no, it doesn't work.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. Hey,
What I would,
I've got one thing I want to get into, because I need to get back to the point that you made earlier before I forget, about the
okay.
messiness of change.
Yes.
Because that's one of the key parts of health coaching, right? Is that there's, there's. I think you even have a resource you show your coaches where there's actual,
I
a
do.
little diagrams on a piece of paper where it's got a sort of linear progress towards a goal. And of course, in reality, it not only never looks like that. Those detours and those setbacks themselves are the actual path to success. Do you want to talk about that? Because that's one of the, the reframes in health coaching, and the sort of understanding of the power of setbacks.
Yeah. And I think it's important to understand, and the change model that we use came out of the sort of stop smoking era, where people would believe you're just going to stop and that's it. And we know that in human psychology, that's not correct, that people will be thinking about it, they will be preparing, they might be doing it, they might still be doing it, but then they might fall off the wagon. And, it takes another while to come back. And so understanding that it is the journey, that, lifelong movement, for example, or nutrition, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have stressors, but you're always consistently going for your best health values. And that is normal. I think when I said before that the biggest mountain is your mind, it is the frame that you look at your health with. It's not, okay, I didn't do it, so I'll start next week. I'm going to start in the next quarter of the day. It's not this all or nothing thinking, or the catastrophizing. It's really dealing to the way of thinking and being able to go, yeah, it's messy, but I'm just going to start again in another hour. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go.
We're looking at some of the patient records of blood sugars, HbA1cs, over a
Yes.
period of time, when they're reversing their diabetes through changing their diet, getting the sugar and starch out. And you see people quite successful. They get their AS once they go down, they may not even have a diagnosis, but then it creeps back in and then rushes back in. And, successful remission of that might take 4 or 5 attempts for some people. But they get, if you can frame it in a way that they're learning something each time, and they're positive about their own, all of our own frailty as humans, then that seems to be something that really resonates with health coaching, that I really like, is that, because like I reckon my willpower is actually pretty good. Like
Say it is, Grant.
it is, but in reality, I still fail all the time.
Yep.
But my enduring characteristic is mostly I seem to be able to get back on the horse, and I'm not sure why I've been good at that over the years, but I am. So it's not my inability to fail. I'm a lifelong failure, but I've somehow been able to get mostly back on the horse,
Yeah,
or at some point just give up on that horse altogether, but climb on another horse. At least I'm on a horse.
exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, but that's the bit that people struggle with the most, isn't it? Is accepting failure as normal.
And something that's a really interesting point, because what I've noticed in my clients is when they look at how it's gone over the last week, say you've seen them a week ago, they're straight to the fails. They're straight to the bad, to the negative. And that's how our brain's wired. So
Mm.
it's normal. But your job as the coach is to actually be able to notice the wins
Mm.
and kind of ask questions that help them see the wins. And it's quite incredible when I've seen a lot of clients have actually made quite phenomenal change. They don't recognize it. They
Because
really
they're
don't
dwelling
see.
on the things that they
They're
didn't get better.
dwelling on the negative, which is our brain that looks to the future and looks to the past and kind of finds the problems. It's normal. However, this is often what gets in the way. So it's being able to help them see the wins and recognize that in times of stress and when something's going on in your life, you're probably likely to unconsciously go back to the old habit. So it's starting to be able to recognize your thinking, think about your thinking, and understand what your patterns are. And, cut them off at the chase. Starting to understand you and your inner workings is something you can do really well alongside a health coach.
Hey, so as we wrap up, let's just talk about some coaching situations over the years.
Sure.
Okay, I'm prepared for this, so see what you come out with, whatever comes to
Okay.
mind. What's something interesting that you've learned from a client that surprised you?
I think back to one of my very early clients who was with me for weight loss. And I guess just by listening to his story and kind of getting under the emotion, it was the profound shame of what was going on for him and the acceptance and of the life limitation at a very early age. And although he'd come to a health coach, his belief was he was never going to get there.
Yeah.
Because I sensed that. I said to him, I got this feeling that there's something still in the way. And it was, I guess, really that gift of being able to be in a space with another client, with another person who's being really honest and having this conversation and say, the deep shame that they had. And, being able to share with him with permission that, this is not your fault. Our society is set up to, to fail. The ultra processed foods are everywhere. This lad didn't know how to cook. He really didn't understand nutrition, and he was really struggling. He was, the gaming, everything, all the sort of comfort addiction was there, but it was that underlying belief, and that really stopped him. And I think
Yeah,
when I found that key, I was like, wow, this is it.
yeah, it's interesting with that, and it's been interesting to me with the GLP-1 agonist drugs recently.
Oh, yes.
And I suppose one of the reasons they exist in the first place is because people see no other way out,
Yes.
and the shame. But I've also had a number of people talk to me about them, going, "Oh, yeah, I'm on them, but I don't want anyone to know, ever, because that's even more shameful." So there's sort of a dual shame going there. I was shamed in the first place of the way I let myself get. I acknowledge that I'm out of control and I can't do anything about it. Now I'm taking these medicines, but I don't want anyone to know about it. Sort of as a lose situation, especially when you realise that when you stop those medicines,
Muscle mass.
80% likely that weight's going back on, but with lower muscle mass, which is even
Yes.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And, that is it. The shame that people have with taking medications, with weight loss, with all of those things, really is preventing a lot of these health outcomes. And so we need to get down and have these safe spaces for clients to be able to understand what they really want. Because coaching's all about listening to what the person in front of you really wants.
Okay, what about a case where you've gone, man, I don't know, that seems really hard, and they've surprised you by just going all the way to the line?
Oh, I've had a few of these. I've got one actually at the moment, um, who hit action and has just kept going. And again, this was after a lot of things happening that were pretty hard for her. And, her self-doubt was huge, her inner critic, even though she was going along. And she even told me as well, I'm not going to do this, but I'm coming to you anyway. I often get this. I want this, but it's too hard. I'm stuck. That's why people come. But I've just seen her just go from strength to strength to strength. And she told me I'm not motivated, all of these things. Well, I beg to differ. Just through,
What was she saying about? What did she want to achieve?
she wanted to achieve weight loss, um, prevent burnout. She was feeling burnt out. So she was doing the whole shaboodle, her sleep, her breathing, her movement. She wanted the whole change. And what I've seen is through being able to understand her thinking and dive deep on that, she's been able to keep going. She's been committed to, doing her reflections and making a plan for each week, and she's flying. And I think the secret with her was understanding her saboteur and what it was telling her she couldn't.
Yeah,
But
so
I've even, like, how fast she's going is just beyond belief.
well, so that's a common misunderstanding. I've got to run some of this foundational stuff that I've been rewriting past you. You'll
Yeah,
often see, oh, we always need to head for we sort of, in goal setting and behaviour change, we should also always set small, achievable goals, set the bar as low as possible. But, and that might be true for some people, but other
oh,
people actually,
sure.
they just go all out, and actually they do succeed with it.
They do. And, I think that comes back to the person, right? Let them set the goals. Use your intuition as a coach. Say to them, on a scale of 0 to 10, how realistic is this for you? Because we're all different. And if you get a sense of something, share it. But if you don't, trust them.
The challenge techniques on, when this for people who don't know about this, it's actually coaching, but it's a little bit, sometimes they're not getting to a goal themselves, but they want to. So you go, would it be right? I'm going to give you a challenge. You can accept it, you can reject it, you can counter offer, and you offer up something.
Yeah.
And certainly do. I've had it where they've gone, I reject that, and I've gone, maybe I should have set that a bit lower. They're like, that's way too easy.
That's a good outcome, Grant.
Oh no, it's great, but
That's a good challenge.
it's a bit like with your kids when they were younger. It's like, what do you think the punishment should be? And they're like, well, X, Y, and Z, and you're like, oh, it's a bit harsh.
That's the fun piece, right? That's the fun. And look, I've got one client who I've had for quite a long time, and every time I say, "Can I challenge you?" she goes, "Oh, yes." She loves it.
Yeah,
She loves to be, she's quite competitive in her
yeah,
life. She's a sportswoman, and she loves that. She loves to, and she'll say no, or she'll go, "I'll do half of it."
yeah.
Because that's the skill of a health coach is, telling them when you start working with them is this is about you and your agenda and you being the boss here. I'm not the boss.
Yeah.
You're going to decide.
Well, the next step on that challenge thing is this idea of
Yeah.
accountability, which I think is worth mentioning because people think, because sometimes health coaching can say, well, that's on their agenda, we'll listen to them and everything. It's like, you've done this challenge, or they said they're going to do something, and then the next sentence you utter as a health coach is like, okay, well, how would you like to be held accountable? silence, and you've got to hold that space. And people are like, "Oh, what do you mean? I'm accountable?" And you're like, "No, it's up to you. What do you want?" Tell us about your
Yeah.
experiences with that.
Well, I think that's a call to action
Yeah,
for me. It's about what are the committed actions you're about to take. And you've got to sit in that uncomfortable silence. And it is a bit of a mini challenge, really.
yeah,
Accountability is so important in coaching because what we know, again, about humans is to be able to get action, they need to be able to see and feel what it's like to do the behavior. We can all think about what we're going to do
yeah,
and have the emotion around how it might feel when we do it. But to actually do it is pretty hard. So we're not motivated by nature as humans. It's better just to make those steps. So this is part of, if you can just talk to them about in detail what they're going to do and challenge them on the accountability to get back to you or to get back to someone else, they're more likely to do it. And I have clients that I text accountability to them once a week, or they text me what they're doing. And again, for some people, not everybody, it works really well. You're that accountability buddy, and they're like, right, I've done the breakfast of omelets for a week. Now I'm going to do this. And right, let me know at the end of the week where you've got to.
yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. So I think that's just an important one because I think it brings home that this isn't just hugs and warm fuzzies.
not at all.
At the end of the
Not,
day, actually, we're interested in what you do. Uh, your behaviour actually counts here, and we want you to be accountable for it in a way that suits you. Um, I mean, imagine that. Imagine how much different medicine would be as every time you left your doctor, it's like, well, this is what we've agreed to do. How do you want to be accountable? Imagine, I mean, it just seems weird, but that'll be cool if that happened in normal medicine.
Can I tell you, Grant, in my role as a patient at risk nurse with deteriorating patients, I do use health coaching techniques or coaching moments.
Yeah,
So I will say to a patient or their family, what's most important to you right now? What's your biggest concern? What's one thing you might do?
yeah,
So I do use it all the time.
yeah,
And look, it works so well.
yeah,
And I do love the work of Dr. David Unwin
yeah,
um, in this, where he does in his GP practice, he uses the health coach techniques to help move his patients from where they are to where they are now. And part of my role, I do see the same people.
yeah.
I see the same staff. I see the people around me use these techniques, and it really is. It's really helpful.
Wait, hang on. So wait, is that a thing that in the hospital setting you've actually said to someone, how do you want to be held accountable?
I haven't. I've said, oh, how would it be if you let me know if you do it?
Yeah. And there's a
Like, how
bit of
would it be? Because it's
a bit of a
permission.
silence then as they actually have to process the
Yeah.
fact that they are accountable, right?
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
I went to a ward
Yeah,
last week where I challenged a charge nurse a year ago to something,
yeah.
and he came up to me and said, I did it. I'm
Oh,
doing
that's
it
cool.
every Thursday, and I've
Yeah,
been doing it ever since. So sometimes, and I know this in coaching, in between sessions, that a lot of the work's done in between, right?
yeah,
So people might not do things, or you might have said, I've got a sense of something, can I share it with you? They might come back to you in 3 months and months. So it is these conversations, these calls to action are really important. And that's the piece about change model, right? They may still have been contemplating it, but it's helping move them forward. They're processing.
okay. I think we might wrap up the pod. How do Thanks, Sonia. That's awesome.
So,
And how do people find you online?
so I am on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn now. So
I see that.
find me on
I'm
LinkedIn.
liking all your posts.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And on there you can find my website. I'm still at the local hospitals. I work, as you know, as a lead for PREKURE. So if you're going to come do the course, I would love to work with you. And I would say they're health coaching skills, but they're life skills. I particularly love the mental health labs and the nutrition, look, everything's pretty good there, and it has certainly changed my life. I think one of my biggest feelings around health coaching and health right now is health is not a luxury. It's a foundation. And we spend a lot as humans on luxuries. We see them as luxuries. Actually, health is a luxury. And you said it well earlier, Grant. When you haven't got it, it's the number one thing you want.
Yeah, well, that's the old meme. Ask a sick person what their dream is, and they just have one. Ask a healthy person, they have 1,000.
Hey, it's Grant here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We don't advertise. We're never going to, but we have one request for you and one only. If you felt this show was worthwhile, can you please rate us, and please rate us 5 stars? That's it. Thanks very much.